all, I've never really taught in front of this many students, so you'll have to be patient with me. The other thing as well is that I've been traveling for a long time, so pretty jet lagged at the moment. And I'm also struggling with a bit of a cold as well, so I might take a few pauses now and then. Alright, so first of all, like who here like trains or practices or focuses a lot on no fins? I'm just curious. Alright, so not a huge amount. Who would like to spend a little bit more time doing it? Okay, cool, awesome, that's good. A lot, I guess there's quite a lot of information around available for constant weight. Free immersion is not exactly very complex, so you can kind of really wing it with that. But with no fins, there's not a huge amount of information. And I guess it's due to the fact that there's only a small amount of freedivers that dedicate a lot of time specifically to no fins. The other thing as well is that you can draw a lot of similarities to swimming, but it's kind of like a hybrid or a combination between butterfly swimming and breaststroking. But even with breaststroking, as in the leg kick, there are a few different ways that you can approach that as well. So it doesn't directly translate into depth or DNF. So that's why there's not a huge amount of information about. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start off with like an in-depth analysis of technique. So work from duck dive to arm pull, leg kick, and so on. I'll try and be as detailed as possible. So if you have any questions, like please write them down as I'm talking, because chances are you'll probably forget them by the end. Then I'll talk you through my approach or my dive structure, basically what I'm looking to achieve, what I'm thinking about, not necessarily on a deep dive, but when I'm visualizing the dive. Okay, so they're both very separate things. When you visualize a dive, you're paying conscious efforts to what you're trying to achieve. When you go and attempt a performance, you're essentially not trying to do anything. You're hoping that it's going to happen autonomously or more subconsciously. Okay. So I'll talk you through my approach. Then I'll talk a little bit about how you can train and prepare specifically for CNF. I don't really do a lot of DNF, so my training is geared predominantly for CNF. There are again crossovers, and so when I do DNF, obviously the technique definitely does cross over, but as I say, my approach in the pool and in depth is focused on CNF. And then I'll talk a little bit about why I started, or why I kind of fell in love with no fins. Initially I was drawn to it because of the dedication that was required. For me personally, I've always been someone that's put more value into quality over quantity. So instead of like piling on the meters, obviously there's a lot of, I guess like freediving is like full of paradoxes. We're always saying that it's not really about the numbers, but everybody wants to get deep with free immersion constantly. So for me, it was more about the quality of the meters as opposed to getting deeper, or it changed to that anyway. But as I practiced it then, I discovered a few other things as well, which I found were very important, which I'll share with you at the end. So, any other requests actually, just before I start talking about technique?
Can you just progress, like a structured way to progress in depth?
Mm-hmm. Progress in what way?
It's probably one discipline where getting down is the easy part, so to speak, compared to like free immersion and stuff, like coming up is probably not the hard part of it, so like...
I wouldn't agree with that.
No?
No, definitely not.
Oh.
Yeah, But what do you mean in progression? Like, do you mean technique, or do you mean depth? Or
yeah, I guess just like the safest way to progress.
Safest way, yeah.
As a diver in general, digging up there as well.
Okay, yeah, cool. All right, so the steps. Yeah, cool. All right. So start off at the beginning then. The duck dive. It's very, very crucial for all disciplines. It's that key moment where we transition from breathing into diving. Okay, so for me, there's three key transition phases of a dive. Obviously, there's the beginning, because we're breathing up, we're generating relaxation, and then we're aiming to transfer that relaxation that we've generated in the breathe up into the dive, into the beginning. Okay, so that it's probably the most crucial transition phase. The second, I guess it's not as distinct as that first one. The second transition phase is going into the free fall, and so that's a little bit more of a gradual change as opposed to an abrupt start. And then the last, probably almost just as important as the beginning, is the turnaround, because we're going from a state of rest and relaxation into a state of working hard, basically, so our body's kind of switching in a different way. So it's again important for us to transfer the relaxation that we've generated, hopefully during the free fall, into the ascent. So in terms of technique for the duck dive, there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. I'm sure there's other ways as well. So the two ways that I approach it, predominantly what I do is I breathe up on the back. So I find that my legs sink, so I need noodles on both ends, on the head and on the legs. So I find that, again, that for me, I can get into a deeper state of relaxation like that. But if I was diving on a buoy, I'd probably breathe up sitting up, just because of the way the duck dive is. I find that I can find a better line of orientation if I start sitting up on a buoy. So on a dive platform, if I'm on the back, so I make sure that the line is just underneath my, depends on the current actually, but yeah, just underneath my left armpit. And then I'm breathing up, crossing my hands, making sure that I don't move. When I start the duck dive, I'll push off just slightly off the line, just to give me just a little bit of momentum, and turn over. So this is a crucial part as well. And so it's very simple to get right, but it's also very easy to get wrong as well. So what I see a lot of the time is people kind of cross over like this. So when they turn around, they're kind of like almost trying to do, like, raise their arm above their head. And so that's not a very fluid way of flipping over. So if you cross over just directly over to your other shoulder, you'll just flip over super easy. And then I'll make sure that you kick your leg, the noodle away before you do that actually, as you're pushing off to create momentum. So you flip over, and you don't really want a lot of space now in between the duck dive. So you want to kind of crunch the abs and extend the arms up. By extending these arms as well, what that does is it creates like a little bit of drag, and so that also helps to push you into the water. Unlike duck diving with bifins or a monofin, so if you imagine this is you at the surface now. So you're extending the arms, you're creating forward momentum. You're actually just going to aim to do like a 90-degree bend, keeping your arms extended. So your field of vision is like that, so you see the surface of the water as well. If you do that with no fins, we don't really have enough power. And so what's most likely to happen is you'll come in on like a 70, 80-degree angle. And then that'll pull you away from the dive line. Can anybody relate to that feeling where they start the duck dive and they're kind of like on an angle and they have to pull back? Yeah. So when you crunch the abs and you bend at the waist, try and bend slightly towards the dive platform. So you imagine that this imagine that this is your torso. When you bend at the waist, you kind of bend it a little bit like that. Then the second part of the duck dive, there's two options here. Either you can keep the legs straight, and again, the weight of the legs will push you into the dive, or you can bend the knees and then kick them up. So it's kind of like using it as a spring to push you into the duck dive. Okay. So those are the two options with that. As soon as you find a vertical line, then you want to obviously give as strong an arm pull as possible. This duck dive part is very crucial, and when I first started practicing no fins, I realized that if I screwed up the duck dive, it was better for me to start the dive again. And it's actually like, I see it quite a lot, quite flimsy duck dives, and so you have to use probably about 30-40% more energy for those first two strokes. And so what will happen is if you screw up the duck dive, you'll probably have to use at least one more stroke cycle to get you into free fall, which is quite a lot for no fins. Okay, so if you have a variation of 1 or 2 stroke cycles within the first 20-25 meters, then that's telling you that there's quite a big variation at the beginning of the dive. Okay, so don't be afraid to put power into that first arm pull, all right, so that it gets you into that dive as fast as possible. Any questions on the duck dive so far? No? So the arm pull is what we're focusing on next, all right? And I see differences in the way that this arm pull is taught, specifically with the Molchanov system or Alexi's way of teaching. And my arm pull is a little bit different to his, so it might differ with what you've been taught before.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Could you come back to the duck dive? Because what you explained was on
the platform,
which
yeah.
most of us don't do.
Yeah. So it's essentially the same. When you start off, if you've got a noodle in between your legs, then when you fall forwards, that the noodle kind of like gives you a little bit of momentum, which is simulating the same kind of momentum that you put when you push off. Do you know what I mean? Because that positive buoyancy is holding you up when you bend forwards, that noodle releasing just pushes you forwards a little bit. And then it's basically the same duck dive after that.
If you don't have a noodle and you're hanging on to a buoy,
yeah.
Is it something like a slight push off the buoy and then you're approaching for it?
I've tried to do that in the past, and the buoy just moves, and so it's just too much. Like it doesn't give you anything.
Okay.
So I would just focus more on the face down motion to give you just a touch bit of momentum, and that's it really. Any other questions? So the arm pull. I guess this is where you're going to create the most amount of drag when you're extending it above or reloading. Okay, so we want to make ourselves as small as possible. So if we're going to extend up here like this, okay, obviously all of this is going to cause a lot of drag. What I see a lot is divers kind of like extending like this. Okay, so right here, right now, yes, it's quite small, and it feels like you're keeping quite a small line. But if you're extending with your arms in front of you like this, there's no way you can avoid doing that. Okay, like if you video yourself and you go through that video in slow motion, if you are one of those divers that does that, then try and pause it in this position, and you'll notice that you're in this position whilst you're also trying to do a leg kick as well. And so that's one of the other reasons why you kind of go a little bit on an angle as well. Okay. So for me, I found that the best way was to lift the shoulders slightly. Again, you want to try and find a balance between effort and efficiency. Okay. So we can lift the shoulders higher, and that'll obviously give us more streamlining, but the payoff is a lot less in terms of efficiency, so we kind of just lift up a little bit. So you lift the shoulders up, okay, and then you kind of like, it's kind of almost like a robot, okay, so you lift the arms, and so they do kind of brush ahead of you, but they're not going straight up, they go into the side, okay. So lift the shoulders up, and then you keep the elbows about here, and then in this position, then you push up. So what you want to avoid doing is that, okay. So if you're going to do that, then it's basically the same thing. You want to kind of, like at this point, that's the most amount of drag you're going to create. You see the difference, like if you looked at me head on like this, I lifted my shoulders, and then I'm not changing anything, yeah? Okay, so this extension is also really important as well, all right? There's two ways that you can do this. Either at this position, you can cross over like that, so you're in this starting position, or you can just extend like this. And I kind of use both ways. In the pool when I'm training, I'll extend like this. I'll flip it over and I'll extend like that. And the same with the descent. I'll do that same thing. I feel like there's a little bit more time with the descent to add a little bit more streamlining. But on the ascent, I'm not really too bothered with extending like that. And actually I find more flow of swimming if I extend like this. So I kind of use the two ways. Okay. Any questions on the arm pull? Anything that's not clear? Yeah.
How do you talk about the realization? Will we come to that later, or because for those who cannot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we're just talking about the arm pull now.
Okay.
We will talk about that when we get to dive structure.
Yeah, could you get us to do it after you've shown it, and then just say, like, this is an example of what you're doing it? You know what I mean? Like, just
Sure, yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So that's just the loading phase, okay? So we haven't really covered the full arm pull yet. So after we're in this position, then we want to catch as much water as possible. So we want to catch from the beginning, okay? Avoid trying to pull out like that or backwards even. Again, when I see a lot of people kind of pulling out here, and again, we're not really pushing water alongside the body. So you imagine as if you're pulling water in front of you, but alongside the body, okay? So catch at the beginning, come to about here. This is where you want to start thinking about bringing it in front of you, okay? A lot of people come too far down, and at this position then we've kind of lost the momentum. Plus when we come across like this, we're going to come across on a straight line. You imagine you've created momentum here like this. If you don't continue that rate of momentum, anything less than that same speed is going to cause drag. Does that make sense? Yeah? So if we're going to come across on a straight line, but we're moving, then we're going to cause drag with our own arms, okay? So we need to continually push down. So when we're here, we pull down to here, and then it's kind of like either like a keyhole shape or like a triangle, okay? So here, then we want to come here. And actually, the technique will change depending on the period of the dive. So at the beginning of an ascent, I'm actually kind of keeping my arms pretty straight, okay? So it puts a lot of effort onto the core. So if you imagine like pulling yourself up here like this, if you do that, like you're going to feel it a lot in the core, right? Obviously we're pulling through the water so we can get away with it. If you talk to breaststrokers about the beginning of the first, if they're doing like 50 to 100 meter sprints, they're actually keeping the arms quite straight because it gives more speed and power. But a longer breaststroke swim, they're actually tucking the elbows in because they're going to fatigue faster. So I looked at my ascent, and actually at the beginning I keep it more straight, and then towards the end, obviously when I'm fatiguing, my elbows will come closer in. So it's not just the palms that are obviously propelling you through the water. It's your whole arm, and so that's why obviously it's different when you keep it like here, like that, and when you bring it closer in. So just think about catching water with everything. Okay. So here, and then you want to bring it closer to here, and then you want to bring both hands close together. They don't have to touch, but you imagine the power difference. In terms of surface area, bifins are probably similar to a monofin. But because a monofin is obviously connected and it's just one piece, it can catch more, it can move more water. And it's the same thing again with the arms or the hands. If we're out here, then they're essentially just two singular objects trying to catch water. If we bring them together, then we can catch more water. Okay? The same thing as with your hands as well. Again, I guess when you teach beginners to pull through the water, you tell them to keep their palms closed, because they'll probably do that. But actually, you can keep a slight little bit of separation in the hands. That will act kind of like almost like a webbing. It'll catch the water, and so again, that's increasing your surface area just a little bit. Okay. Did you have your hand up to ask a question? No. So actually, that's another thing as well. When you're extending up here like this, okay, make sure you go the whole way. If you reduce it just to here, or if you catch here, that's like 20 centimeters difference, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you multiply that over, say, 10 or 20 cycles, that's 4 meters difference over that 20 cycles, okay? Which is quite a lot. So that's like 2 or 3 less cycles. So instead of doing 20, you can get away with doing maybe 17 or 18 cycles. Okay? Do you follow me with that? Is that clear? Yeah? Okay. So at this position now, you're obviously pushing through. And again, this is where a lot of common fault points come in. So what I see a lot of people doing is just kind of giving up at this point. But actually, we're pushing all the way through. So at this stage, it's just the tricep really that's pushing through. And then at this stage, you're actually still also getting a lot of force with your wrists all the way to the end. Okay. Make sure that you don't do that, because when you do that, again, you're just pushing water against yourself as opposed to alongside. So make sure that the wrists tilt. Okay. So this arm pull, the complete arm pull would be, and then make sure after you've done that to relax. Okay. So again, what uses a lot of energy when you start learning how to swim with no fins is the constant activation that I see a lot of people have. Like when they do the arm pull, they're like that. Yeah. Same with the legs and with the arms. That uses so much energy. Okay. So as soon as you're finished using your muscles, relax them. Okay, and benefit from the propulsion that you've created. Okay. So in more real time, the arm pull is like this. Okay. And actually, I don't know if you can see, but there's a slight lift to the shoulder as well. Yeah. That lift to the shoulder, basically what it does is it makes you a little bit smaller into like finding a small column of water, and kind of like played around with it in the pool, and it gives a little bit more glide in the pool. And so naturally, when you train something like that with CO2 tables, it will come into depth as well. I don't consciously try and do it in depth, but I've noticed that I do lift a little bit, especially towards the end. So in terms of effort, again, this changes depending on the period of the dive. You're not like from the ascent, I guess, is where we're most concerned about, because that's where we want to again balance efficiency with effort and strength. So I would say it's about 70 to 80% effort, certainly not 100%. When you're training, then you can give a little bit more effort just to condition the muscles. But on an ascent, you don't want to be given as much as you've got, basically. Okay. So before we have a go at that, does anybody have any other questions about the arm pull? No? Okay, so yeah.
Just at depth, do you still extend all the way, like, or do you try to avoid squeeze or?
Yeah, I think I used to, but to be honest, like one of the beauties of no fins depth diving is that you have to obviously dive shallower than you dive with other disciplines. The other good thing about it is that you have a forced mandate to curb your depth progression. So you're taking smaller steps anyway. And so I kind of thought that there wasn't really much need to curtail the extension. So now I don't really bother so much. And actually I wouldn't recommend it, because then you're kind of developing a bad habit. So it's a better approach would be to dive safe depth and fully extend and master your technique. And then fully extend that. Master your technique, and then you won't have that worry, and obviously progress slower then as well. Any other questions?
You dive with nose clip or with mask?
With a nose clip, yeah. But I mean, I dive with a mask as well. Technically won't change that much with a mask. So if I can just get a volunteer, just a second, so I can show you how you can practice this drawing. Okay, so if you extend your arms, okay, well, this is what you guys are going to do now as buddies. So I'm going to give you resistance, okay? So I want you to catch the water. So you notice initially what you do, what you can see there is you're pushing down like this. You want to kind of tilt just a little bit, okay? So now I'm going to give you resistance, and now I want to direct your arm pull. So you notice also that the arms are bending already there, okay? You're going to keep them straight, not too straight. A slight micro bend in the elbows, okay, just like that. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, okay, good. All right, and now also is your back rounding a little bit?
Rounding a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't want you to do that. So yeah. So that's the other thing as well, is in this position, obviously, because it takes a lot on the core. You just hold that. It takes a lot on the core. So what happens when you push in this position, or what can happen, is the back rounds. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to keep this part, this lower core, is kind of like tandem. Yeah. You want to keep that activated. So you keep your back straight, okay? So we'll start from the beginning again. Okay, that's it. Now bring them closer in. Yeah, keep the elbows a little bit. Yeah, and now keep the elbows tucked in. No, yeah, that's it. And now push, and now tilt the wrists, and then push, and now relax. There we go. Good.
I see a lot of people when they do pulls, they bring the butt out.
That's because they're curtailing that strain on the core. So when you do this, you're basically taking the weight off the core. So you can do that, but it does use a lot more energy. And I guess
Creates a bit more drag also.
I wouldn't say. I guess it would create a little bit. Well, yeah, if you're going to just stick the butt out, yeah, that's going to cause drag if you don't combine it with a monofin kick.
Right.
But if you do it with a monofin kick, I guess you get as much drag, much propulsion as you create drag. But I guess you have to weigh up what your limiting factor is. Is it the strength of the core? If it is, then perhaps giving a monofin kick might help. Yeah, any questions about that? Is that clear about the monofin kick? Yeah? Okay. Alright, so if you guys want to just buddy up now and have a go at that.
Just a little bit.
creating force with the leg kick. So if your leg kick isn't creating force, it's kind of hitting you both ways. It's hitting you because you're wasting energy by moving your legs, first of all. But what's also happening as well is that you may be creating drag with the leg kick or with the movement of the leg kick, but you're also not taking the drag off from the arm pull. Okay, so that's kind of like the most crucial part of the leg kick, is maintaining your momentum through the reloading of the arms of the head. Okay, so in this position, you're also reloading the leg. Okay, and then here is when you kick. Okay, is when you're extending here. So you extend here so that you can continue the motion. If you're going to kick here, then extend, what you'll do is have like a start stop. Okay. If you have a look at the profile, you should be able to tell if you're starting and stopping. What you want is a gradual increase. You don't want to come back down, especially as you start going deeper. If you have that problem, then obviously you're going to come down a lot further. Okay. So with the leg kick itself as well, again we want to obviously think about pushing water down. Okay. This is where it differs slightly from the leg kick, or where it can differ slightly from the leg kick with breaststroking. So with breaststroking, they kind of teach you. I'm not a swimmer, so I think I know that they teach you to keep the knees quite straight, okay, or close together, so that the legs are coming behind and you're kind of like pushing down like that. You don't need to do that with CNF or when you're moving underneath the water, okay, because of the way like the surface and the water and the drag. So we can actually have a little bit of separation with the knees, okay? So they can be a little bit like this. When you're pulling the leg up, okay, you want to kind of think about getting it up here, right? You want to tilt the heel and then kind of activate this part, because again, it's not just the foot, it's the whole leg. So if you're going to do this, then you're not going to cause as much drag as if you have the whole thing open, okay? And the limiting factor for a lot of people, especially men, is that is an inflexibility or a limit with your hip flexor. Okay? So what happens is a lot of people kind of bring the leg or the knee up in front of them, and again that causes drag. And what happens then is they kick backwards like that, and so you again go on an angle, okay? And as soon as you deviate from that vertical line, then you create all kinds of drag, either coming up or going down, okay? So we always want to kind of think about keeping a straight line. Imagine as if you're in a tight pipe, okay? Which is just enough movement for you to extend both your arms and your legs. Obviously you can't extend in the pipe. You're kind of like trying to make a small movement so that you can create enough movement to push yourself forward, but not out. As soon as you start pushing out, if you kick out like that, again that also causes drag. Yeah, it's quite common. So a lot of the time it's about putting too much effort into the leg kick as well. So if you don't have a flexibility issue, a lot of people are trying too hard with the leg kick, so they're kind of pushing too much, yeah, and you're kind of like kicking out. So you think about pushing down, okay, and it's a slowish movement when you raise it up, but it's a fast snap when you're pushing down. If it's slow, if it's like two parts, again you're going to cause drag because you push at the beginning. But then remember, if we don't maintain that forward momentum, then that's going to cause drag, okay? So just think about just pushing down. So I guess for dry practice it's a little bit harder, but you can practice like pulling it up here like this and just having a look just to see that position. So again, you can see that, imagine both of my legs, I would have that much separation with the knee, and my foot would be tilted like this. and then I push down like that. And then what's really important after you do that leg kick is to point the toes, okay? And again, the same as the arm pull, if you keep it activated like that, a lot of people keep the whole leg activated, okay? That's going to use a lot of energy. So instead, try and think about the difference between that and just in the, well actually I can't really do anything like this, but like you're kind of just keeping the activation in the ankle as opposed to the calf. Just try that now. Just point the toe, okay? Pull the leg up, like activate with the whole leg, and then try and minimize the muscles that you're using so that you feel just that activation in the ankle, okay? And what's also going to happen as well, especially when we're swimming through the water, is if you're just going to activate in the ankle, your leg is going to be completely straight. It's going to be slightly bent as well. Same as when you go into free fall with bifins or with a monofin. Okay, if you relax the knee, then it's going to sit in a slightly bent position. And that's kind of what we want to be sitting in, okay? So when we extend with the leg kick, again, when we extend here like this, what a lot of people do is arch the back and the legs come behind. So you have like like this kind of shape, okay? And again, that's also going to cause a lot of drag. So again, we're going to bring focus back to this area. If you tilt the hips forward like that, then you keep more of a straight line, okay? So again, this is also effort as well. It's balancing the right amount of effort or specifying the muscles that we're using to create effort instead of like using the whole body, okay? So when we extend, snap, and then just keep the hips slightly tilted so you keep a straight line, okay? And then that's it, really. Pretty simple. Sorry? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I don't, like I equalize hands free, so for me this part is a little bit fuzzy. And so I can't really give you a huge amount of information. What I will suggest is, so so you leg kick, extend, arm pull, and equalize here. And then maybe when you extend it as well, you can equalize that there. So you can equalize two parts. Those two moments are where I would suggest equalizing. So just to reconfirm, extend, arm pull, equalize. But obviously when you're equalizing, you don't want to be doing that, yeah? Especially because obviously you've just did an arm pull and you want to make use the most amount of drag, the most amount of momentum as possible. So just try and sneak it in as fast as possible. Okay.
How long are you gliding for finish?
This is now, I guess, down to your dive structure and how you like periodize your descent and your ascent. Okay? But actually, you don't really periodize the ascent. It's just swimming up. Okay.
When you swim up, do you glide until you stop? And
No. No, you're always maintaining a certain speed on the way up. You don't want to be waiting at all on the way up. Okay? It may look like that on the videos, but that's certainly not the case. The speed changes slightly, obviously, when difference between in the middle of an arm pull and say just a leg kick, or when you're reloading, but you're always moving up. Okay. So. My plan or my approach, actually just before we move on to that, does anyone have any questions about that technique? Is that a little, yeah?
Can you show like the way you do the on-side?
Again? Yeah. So, would you prefer front on or sideways? Okay. So, just a little lift. So you notice that this elbow now, it stays in this position. Yeah? Doesn't change. So that I think that's the key point in the reloading of the arm pull is that maintaining that position. So as soon as you bring it up to here, then it stays down. Okay.
do you do the whole thing?
You need to throw the leg.
That flies. Yeah, cool. Any other questions? No?
I heard that when you're doing a lot of chest movements, that you could hurt the lungs. What?
Actually, in my experience, no fins has a completely opposite effect. But I'll get to that at the end. So yeah. Okay, so a dive structure is obviously really important with all disciplines. But I kind of like have a little bit more of a free approach with constant weight, and certainly with free immersion. They require less precision, and it's quite nice to have that that kind of like transient kind of approach. With no fins, it's really important to have like a solid structure, in my opinion, anyway. So I'll run you through what I'm trying to achieve on the descent. So obviously I'm trying to start the duck dive as efficiently as possible. Strong arm pull at the beginning. Then I give 3 pretty strong strokes without any kind of glide. And that'll take me past 10 to 15 meters, okay, or right between that sort of area. Maybe the third one, I'll probably start slowing down a little bit. The fourth one is a little bit slower again. Then the fifth one is slower. I'm starting to think about taking my mouth fill. And then obviously the third one then is as slow as possible. You're kind of like gliding as much as possible. So you're winding the effort down, basically. And it'll take me, these days it takes me exactly the same to get to the same point. And it's kind of like I'm not really using the alarm as, or I'm not relying on the alarm. It's a confirmation that I've done the dive properly, okay? And that's how you should treat that 20-25 meter alarm, okay? It shouldn't be something that you rely on. It just should be a confirmation, and that's it. If, say, for example, you forget to set your alarm, you know that the countless other dives that you've done bring you to the same point, so you shouldn't have to worry about it, okay? So yeah, the first 3 quite fast, then the fourth one is a little bit slower. Fifth one I'm really trying to glide, probably say about that fast, and then the last one then I'll probably glide in a few seconds, maybe 3 seconds in between the arm extension and the arm pull. Then I'd take 2 leg kicks. Actually, after I finish that last arm pull, my arms stay to the side. So a little thing with the arms to the side. If you activate the thumb a little bit, okay, or just stick it here. Basically, the wrist always wants to kind of like turn forwards. So if you just activate the thumb a little bit, what that does is it just keeps it stuck there. And what you can also do as well is just activate this arm a little bit. That doesn't take a lot of energy, but that's going to give a huge difference when it comes to streamlining. Okay. So again, you don't want to fully activate it like that. You don't want to be activating it and you feel that tricep sticking out. Okay, you just want a little bit of an activation. Just try that now. Just stand up. Stick the thumb out a little bit. Take it to the side and just see if you can. Yeah, a little bit less than that. That's it. Yeah, just feel that. Try and over-activate and then relax, but try and hold the same position. So obviously you want the thumb behind, so you're probably going to have to put your phone down to try. Okay. Yeah, just have a look at your person next to you just to see if they look a little bit tense, or if they can activate or relax. Okay, cool. Alright, so if you guys just sit down. So after I pass that point, that 6th cycle, then I give 2 leg kicks. into the free fall. So that'll probably bring me to about 30-ish meters, okay? And then I'll enter free fall. But you certainly wouldn't, if you're diving at shallow depths, you certainly wouldn't want to be working that hard for that amount of time. That, for me, that approach has changed and evolved over the years as I've started diving deeper. Initially, I would start my free fall at 20 or 25 meters instead of 30 to 35.
You were putting more weight before.
That's exactly. Well, actually, I wasn't. My technique is evolved. So, what I noticed was if I pulled myself into the free fall, having maintained a certain amount of speed, then the space between where I continue that speed and where I reach terminal velocity, I lose less speed. So basically, if I come into the free fall slower, then you have a zone where you haven't quite reached terminal velocity, okay? And so if you've come into the free fall period of the dive slow, then that period of the dive is going to cause a lot more drag, and so it's going to take you longer to reach your point of terminal velocity. As my technique evolved, I could go into that free fall faster, and so that zone between that point and terminal velocity didn't affect me so much. So I'd probably use less weight now, actually. But I wouldn't recommend it. I would be happy to use a little bit more weight if it meant that you could get into that free fall having expended a little bit less energy. So don't be afraid to use weight with no fins, but also be aware and be prepared to adjust that as you continue to practice, because the beginning of your no fins career, the weight that you're going to be using is going to be vastly different towards the end. And the speeds are also going to change very fast, especially at the beginning. So I would highly recommend paying attention to your dive profiles. Don't just continue to dive and just consider that your weighting is right, because it's not, especially in fresh water as well. So I don't really know where exactly my neutral buoyancy is these days. I kind of just look on where I reach terminal velocity and calculate an average speed. So I'm aiming to get around about equal descent time to ascent time. Maybe a little bit longer on the ascent, but it's more or less equal. So I'm traveling at about between 0.88 to 0.9 meters per second on the way down, and on the way up, it's about the same. On like a training dive, on a 30-meter dive, 30, 40, maybe even 50 meters, then it's like a meter a second, but that's because I'm packing less, so I can travel fast, and I'm also putting more effort into it as well. So that's the difference then. That time equates to the amount of effort in terms of like how you're balancing your efficiency. Okay. Yeah. Any questions on that? Okay. So yeah.
This is a question for the kick.
Sorry.
This is a question for a topic you covered like a while ago.
Oh yeah.
So you said after you kicked, you want to activate your foot.
You want to point your toe.
You want to point your toe.
Yeah.
So you maintain it pointed after you are free falling all the time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I used to not point it so much. Actually, I don't point it even now. So yeah, it's in free fall, it's fully relaxed. What I changed this year was slight contact with the two big toes. So there is an element of activation with the abductors and hip flexors in order to maintain that contact. And that allowed me to achieve a slightly faster free fall. Whereas before I was just relaxing a little bit more, and so I had a little bit of a wider stance. Okay? So in terms of pointing the toes, no. So what we'll talk about now is preparation and how you can train for CNF. And again, I just want to make it clear that it's training for CNF, not DNF. In depth, I would highly recommend doing repetitive 20, 30-meter dives. Don't be afraid to dive shallower in order to perfect your diving. There's kind of like there's three elements really to what we're doing. There's the learning phase. Obviously, this is what you achieve when you take a course or when you're on a training camp. Training camp's slightly different, but you're acquiring a skill, okay, or you're learning how to practice it. But you can't really put it into a deep dive because it's still in your conscious mind. Then there's the training aspect, and that's the period where you transition your conscious knowledge into the subconscious part of the brain, so that it's slightly more autonomous. And then there's the performing element, and that's obviously the deep dives. So you can't perform if you just learn something. Okay, you need that middle part, and so a lot of the time that's kind of where a lot of people like miss out. When you're doing deep dives, that's not training, that's not developing, or that's not putting that skill into the subconscious. That's just having a crack. Okay, it's just having a go at a dive. It's like a 100-meter sprint runner, just having a go at 100 meters every time and seeing if they can get faster without applying different elements of training and so on. Okay, it's exactly the same. Like, we won't improve if we just have a go at deep diving. So spending a lot of time dissecting the elements. So the first 20 meters, the strength of the arm pull, flexibility of your hip flexor, the periodization of your dives, the weighting. All of that takes time. It could take weeks, months even, okay? And you could do all of that, even flexibility while you're training that, without having done a single deep dive. And then when you go and do your PB dive, then you'll notice a huge improvement, okay? So I would highly recommend that kind of approach as opposed to just trying to deep dive and improve through that means only. For those of you that want a slightly more vigorous training approach, then you can try depth tables. I just want to stipulate that the depth tables do carry like a more increased risk of squeezing because of the contractions. But the benefits of training depth tables is that we simulate a high stress kind of environment or state of mind, and that's most likely where your technique is going to fall apart, is in that high stress or physically demanding period of a dive. Okay, and again, we can't simulate that by doing relaxing 30-meter dives. We need to make it harder for ourselves, because chances are if your technique is going to fall apart on a training table, then most likely it'll fall apart when you're doing your maximal performance. Okay, so we need to also condition the muscles and also condition our CO2 tolerance as well. In terms of examples, I guess you'd have to time how long it would take for you to do, say, a 15 or 20 meter dolphins dive, and then calculate not rest period. It's better to incorporate a start time instead. Okay, so let's just say it takes you a minute to do a 20 meter dive. Maybe you could start off as a start time, maybe 3 minutes. Okay, so then you've got like a recovery of 2 minutes. I'm just giving an example. You can obviously scale this to your ability. If, say, it took you 1.5 minutes to do a 20 meter dive, then you've only got 1.5 minutes of recovery. So what it does is it encourages you to swim in a more efficient and fast manner. Okay? If you increase your efficiency, if you start swimming faster, then obviously you're going to get more recovery time. Okay, so it's like a built-in incentive. If you're just going to have recovery times, then you could swim as slow and relaxed as possible, and you know you're always going to have 2 minutes recovery. Okay. I always aim to do about 6 repetitions of a training table. At least 5. Obviously 6 is good, and then 8 is outstanding. So, in terms of training in the pool, again, what a lot of people do is they train with weight. So you're weighting yourself to be neutrally buoyant. Okay. Obviously that is making it very easy. So literally all of your energy, or your forward momentum, is being put into moving forward. And so a lot of your errors aren't really going to be as visible because you're neutrally buoyant. Whatever you do, you're just going to stay there. Yeah. The best way to train is to weight yourself to be slightly positive. Okay, so if you cause drag, say in the leg kick, or you glide too long, then you're just going to float back up. Okay, so obviously it goes without saying that if you are slightly positive, then there's not going to be a lot of glide in those kinds of laps, and that's exactly what we want to train for depth. Okay, if we're slightly positive, what we can do is we can match the frequency of our strokes in accordance with how we would ascend from depth. Okay, so when you do the leg kick, you kick and then you pull, and that's probably about the speed that I would do it, and then I would glide a little bit and then into the next one and then pull. Okay. So if you deviate from that frequency, like I say, you're just going to float back up. Okay. So what it also does as well is it encourages you to swim faster, and you require more energy and core strength to maintain that forward momentum. Okay. So if you do need a wetsuit, then just ditch at least half of your weight that you're using right now. Okay. In terms of areas that you want to kind of cross-train for, in terms of strength for no fins and also flexibility, first of all, the main place is like the hip flexor for the legs. Okay, so try and focus as much as possible, like on trying to extend this leg kick out when you're practicing your flexibility. There's that exercise actually where you can kind of bend down like this with both legs. I wouldn't recommend doing that. The reason why is it's very aggressive on the MCL. Okay, and swimmers obviously practice this type of exercise, but they usually injure their MCLs eventually. So it's quite an aggressive way of exercising or stretching. So it's probably the most specific. So if you don't have problems with your knees, then you can give it a go. But I'm only going to do it now because I have a problem with my knees. So I guess exercises that you can do, probably one of the best yoga poses that I find for the hip flexor is extending here like this, and then pushing this, so bending over the knee, and then lifting the heart and tilting the hips. Okay, so you can really feel it here. All right. The other really good way of increasing your mobility in your hip flexor is to just get into a squat position and just try and push your ass backwards, okay, and keep your back straight. All right. So the lower you can get, the more flexible your hip flexor is. And what you also want to pay attention to as well is the alignment with your knee and your ankle. Okay. So if it's coming here like that, I don't feel it, okay? If I'm pushing it out like that, then I can really feel it in the abductors, but mainly in the hip flexor, okay? I'm gonna try that quickly. Or, no? That's the quads. So that's fine. Yeah. But you could probably go a little bit deeper, actually. Yeah, you're not limited. You're not really, I can see that you're feeling it really in the hip flexor there. So you're not really, you're more limited. Yeah, this one. Yeah, good. Push back. That's it. Okay, do you feel that there? A little bit different? Yeah. Yeah, so
That's all.
just, so you want to tilt the hips is quite.
You don't go down, you stay up here.
No, you go down. So if you
Lower as low as you can.
yeah, just stay here.
Okay.
And then just and you also yeah. Weighted dive. This is leg. Okay, so if you can take a little bit of extra weight out, yeah, I spelled that right, didn't I? Yeah. Just wondering why you were laughing.
Oh, it sounds horrible.
So yeah, you can take a little bit of extra weight, pull yourself down to a comfortable depth, and just extend your arms and just kick up. Okay, so obviously the overweighting. You're going to notice when you cause drag or when you're not creating propulsion on the way up. If that's too hard, then you can do it without overweighting as well. Okay, so those are the two options for that. But that's kind of preparing us for the main kind of exercise, which is leg kicks descending only. Okay, so duck dive and an arm pull just to get yourself into the dive, and then the same thing. On the way down. So this is obviously a lot harder, and this is where we notice whether we're actually creating any force with the leg kick. But the good thing about exaggerating the difficulty with exercises like this is that you will adapt faster, okay, just intuitively and through necessity as well. If you spend a lot of time doing hard exercises like this, you'll really notice a difference. If you're just going to do, like I say, like easy dives, slightly overweighted, like on the descent, then it's very difficult to improve your technique. So we need to make it harder. Okay. Then we can combine the leg kick only with an arms only ascent. Most of you have done that. Most of you won't have any problems with that as well. I like to kind of like separate those two before practicing or training the complete cycle. That way, when it does come to doing like a full cycle with leg kick and arm pull, it's quite nice and it's kind of like a reward as well. But also, you kind of like notice the little improvements that you made with the other exercises. So you could do the same thing. Once you move on to leg kicking on the descent, or maybe I'll number these actually. So 1, 2, 3. And then the same thing. Okay. I mean, that's going to take quite a lot of time because you probably want to do at least 2 dives for each of them. Okay? And then you can move on to putting the whole thing together. Right? And if you want to find out, I guess, like what your periodization for the dive is, then count your kicks and your arm pulls. But what's most important, especially with improving or self-improving, is that we want instant feedback. Okay. It's really important. Otherwise, we can kind of like think about what we're doing, but unless we see it happening, or unless someone can tell us straight away, we're going to change and morph our memory of what we actually did. Okay. So if one of us is passing by, or if you have an instructor on the buoy, is there an instructor on each buoy? Yeah? Ah, perfect. Okay, cool. So, and does everyone have cameras or? At least one person. All right. So when you put the dive structures together, because obviously it's a lot of work for the instructor to fill all of them. So just the one where you're putting the leg kick and the arm pull together, so that you can analyze that then later and see where you're losing speed in conjunction also with your dive profile as well. And then you can kind of like construct your own sort of structure. Okay. Any questions on that? Yes.
I actually had a question through the pull technique,
Yeah.
pull training.
Yeah.
So you said we should try weighting ourselves slightly positively for you.
Yeah.
But it seems counterintuitive to me because you then condition yourself to direct your momentum in a different direction. No.
No.
So
If
it's fine.
you no, if you have an efficient way of pulling yourself through the water, you won't be pulling on an angle.
Okay.
The only time you start pulling on an angle is when you start floating up, and what that means then is that your arm or your leg or whatever isn't efficient enough. So basically, you will if that happens, you basically need to pull yourself stronger through the water or more powerfully, so that you give yourself more forward momentum and oppose the upward momentum that's being created from positive buoyancy. Does that make sense?
Well, we can talk about it.
I know. I mean, I train like this, so I know exactly what happens.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have any angle when I'm
I think
swimming.
what you might be getting at is that you're saying it's counterintuitive to have too much weight on you. So you're saying,
No, I mean just like physically speaking, if you have a force pointed up.
You have to provide more core strength in order to
Yeah,
put
but
yourself
like
underneath.
physically speaking, if you provide only forward momentum, then you will never cancel out the upward force completely. You will
No,
always
you
like
want
to have-
that. That's the thing. You want that. You want that forward momentum, so that you have to apply more strength in order to keep in a straight line. You're not swimming down. You're aiming to swim straight, but because of that forward momentum, that requires you to put more energy into the pull. If you're neutrally buoyant, you don't have to put that much energy to go forwards, because any kind of like push like that, like you're going to go forwards. If you're positively buoyant, you have to put so much more energy in. Does that answer?
Let's
or
like to
not?
chat about it afterwards. Okay?
You can if you want. Does that make sense for everyone else, or?
Yes. Who is the engineer here?
I agree with you. It makes sense. If your strokes are efficient, you'll always go forward. And if it's inefficient, then you'll start coming out.
No, but I think what you're talking about is the positive buoyancy must be compensated somehow, otherwise you'll be accelerating upwards. Because
saying
it's
slightly
physically
positive.
impossible. But I think it's the position of the body might be that you could be very slightly tilted downwards. That's when the drag act on the body is sort of pull you.
So I can accept the answer that it doesn't affect your deep dives. That would be satisfying for me.
Alright.
So if you say, regardless whether it's true or not, it just
No, I
doesn't-
mean I'm not going to make lead.
If you're swimming along in the pool and you're positively buoyant, you don't have weight up, and you'll be under the water,
You'll be doing it.
and then you stop moving, you stop completely, eventually you'll float to the surface. But so you don't have to be, if you're slightly positively buoyant, you have to have good technique, otherwise you lose speed and you float to the surface.
Okay, I like it.
Right, we'll
Next
we'll
topic.
move on.
Next topic.
So, yeah, basically those are the drills that you can practice then in the next dive session. So obviously it's the day off tomorrow, right? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Just curious, do you do the same amount of facts for CNF as do the others?
Yes, I do, but I didn't used to. And again, that's from an evolution of like technique. When my technique was pretty poor, like I would take less packs for sure. Yeah. So that's something that will definitely change. Yeah.
How often do you do this?
Sorry?
Like in a week, how often would you lift weights?
In a week, that would completely depend on what period of training I'm in. I can't really give like a solid answer on that. But I will talk about that more in one of the other lectures. Yeah. So then finally, I just wanted to talk about some of the discoveries that I made when I started training no fins. So one of the reasons why I also started swimming no fins was that I used to get a lot of squeezes, basically because I dove too deep when I wasn't adapted. I dove too deep when I started freediving, and I had like a kind of a wrong sort of attitude, and my motivations were different as well. So I started no fins diving, so obviously so that I could take a shallower approach. One of the things that I identified, or what I thought I identified with my squeezing, was the way I was having contractions. So contractions is also a kind of like an incorrect term. The diaphragm isn't exactly contracting when we experience this breathing reflex. It's essentially a breathing reflex, okay? And so that's determined by our respiratory muscles expanding in order to either try and take a breath or to try and stimulate those muscles. So what that means is we have the potential to change the direction of our contractions. What was happening with myself, and what I suspect with a lot of people that do witness, we refer to it as trachea squeezes, but actually the most common area that people get squeezes is not the trachea, because the trachea is made of like kind of like C shapes. Okay, so if you look down your trachea that way, that's what you'll see. So the trachea kind of like it can collapse like that. Okay, if it was a full circle, it would be almost impossible for it to collapse. But because it's in that shape, it can get smaller. The area where people usually see squeezes is this kind of area where we split off into the bronchi. And because of the shape of that, it carries more negative pressure because it doesn't have as much compressive flexibility, okay? So what was happening, or what I reckon was happening with my squeezes was I was holding them up here. So if I have a squeeze now, if I have a breathing reflex now, I can breathe, or I can try and breathe, or use these kind of respiratory muscles. And it's kind of the same as like shallow breathing, you know, breathing up into the high chest, yeah? Obviously our intercostals are the most flexible part of our thoracic cage. So it would make sense for us to direct our breathing reflex, or more correctly termed, an intra, jet lag's catching up. Intraflexion, that's it. Okay, that's the correct term, but it's obviously quite long, so it's easier to refer to them as contractions. So what I started doing was doing slow 20-30 meter dives and directing the contractions more into the intercostal muscles. Okay, so instead of breathing here, so you see the direction change. Yeah, instead of breathing tight up here, it's more. I mean, it's a small difference. Okay, but for me, it had a very big change to my diving. Again, I couldn't really enact them in deeper dives just because of the sheer strength of the contractions initially. But what no fins allowed me to do was bring more awareness again into the intercostals, just because of the movement, and I felt like it freed up this area, and so it allowed me to redirect those contractions a little bit more effectively then into the intercostals. Okay, so. Basically what you want to try and do is kind of redirect the contractions like that, okay? Yeah.
By redirect, is it based because you were training to breathe using that muscle, or because
No,
you actually-
well, yes and no. I mean,
Contract
but
that.
it's also like, yes, having contractions in a dive, like I said, with like slow 20, 30 meter dives, slow long 20, 30 meter dives, and maybe just having a few contractions on the way up, and then just trying to bring them more into the intercostals, and then slowly, obviously that consciously you're trying to do that, but that hasn't quite driven into the subconscious part yet, and that's the key, is to get it into the subconscious so that you can do it automatically or on a deep dive. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I think yeah,
Consciously initially, and then so that it becomes subconscious. Yeah.
You can try what you're doing static as well.
Yeah, obviously the contractions of static are different because you're at full lungs. Yeah? So it's always different than when you're experiencing negative pressure. But having said that, yes, you can definitely try and bring more awareness into it so that you can put it into more effect then. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's pretty much the final thing that I wanted to go over. So does anybody have any questions on that? I'm not afraid of pulling.
I mean, how this is related with squeeze?
How is the arm pull related with squeezes? Or how is the way that if you okay, so what you're saying is like can you give yourself more squeezes if you pull harder?
And you change the power of the pull when you are really deep?
No, it's pretty much the same. Like I say, it's about 70 to 80% effort. The first 2-3 pulls are a little bit softer, only because I'm trying to maintain relaxation from the free fall into the ascent. But it's not from trying to protect the lungs. Like I said at the beginning, because no fins, when you're training no fins, you dive shallower, and you have smaller increments. So you kind of have a forced, slower approach anyway. But yeah, I think I explained at the beginning, I wouldn't recommend curtailing the arm pull. What I would recommend is doing shallower dives, safer dives, that you can be comfortable in swimming like that and then slowly progressing in that manner. You don't want to be instilling a bad habit of not pulling, because then that's just going to eat into your time. Yeah? Cool.
What are some of the common mistakes when people started learning dolphins?
There's lots, but kind of like explaining them and just going through the techniques. But yeah, common mistakes: arm pull when you're extending arms, kicking out like that, raising the knees up, and not giving a full arm pull. So those are the four.
What about something that would cause like injury?
Injury in what sense?
Anything, including squeezes or muscle injury or
Yeah, I think muscle injury is difficult for me to, because that depends on the individual level of flexibility. The good thing is that there's a gravity on the shoulder, so there's a lot of yeah, but squeezing is not, it wouldn't be anything to do with it would be to do with that individual's approach and flexibility. Yeah, I don't think that it's to do with it. So yeah, and yeah, just clarifying on that, I've never had a squeeze dive in no fins. So for me, it's completely contrary to what a lot of people think, that diving no fins increases the risk of squeezing. It's not the discipline, it's the dive or the approach, okay, that particular diver has. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
In terms of training with your friends,
Yeah.
all of you, say you've got three people out there doing all no fins.
Yeah.
How do you do a safety spot?
You should have.
Does someone have fins? That's what I'm getting
Sure.
at.
Yeah.
So you bring one no fins.
At least.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're training no fins, if you you got a bunch of people doing no fins. You don't just
No,
have.
I always take, if I'm going out with someone, I would never go out with
That's what I assumed.
No, yeah, good question though.
How hardcore is this guy?
Unless your leg kick is really, really good.
Yeah.
We could try that tomorrow. Was there another question over there?
What's your personal turnaround technique?
It's the same with all disciplines. Preparing for the turn is essential. Don't just let it catch you out. Okay, so when you hear your alarm, then you bring yourself closer to the line, so that the line is here. Then run your hand along the line, and then either when you feel the ball or when you're ready to turn, hold like that. So you're essentially using your momentum to turn you around, and using the line obviously as the fixed point. So when you hold on, you don't use any other energy. You definitely don't twist like that. Okay. So you just hold on like that, and let your legs drop below you, and then your arm is here then, and you can just extend it a little bit, pull, and then you start the ascent then. Actually, just to add on that, I just remembered, just with the drills, it pays a lot to practice the smaller things over and over again, particularly the duck dive. If you want to put a lot of time into no fins, practice the duck dive like 20-30 minutes after a session, and also the turnaround as well. Okay. Cool. Any other questions before we finish for today? Okay. Cool. All right then.